It's Saturday, 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 May 26th, 2018, and we're going to do my top 10 favorite WWE wrestlers of all time. That's right. He's going to be, you have to qualify, you had to be in the WWF or the WWE at some point in your career. Even if it was for a hiccup, you had to be in there at some point for a little bit. Now, there were a lot of great wrestlers. Most of my wrestling memories are in two eras. Basically, it was the 80s rock and wrestling era, and then it kind of petered out a little bit during the kind of that in between the Attitude Era and the rock and wrestling era, where there was like Shawn Michaels and Bret the Hitman Hart were the two main stars. And of course, the Attitude Era ramped it back up. Now, the more recent stuff I don't follow as closely, but I watch like Cultaholic, WrestleMania, What Culture Wrestling, Jim Cornette's podcast, Stone Cold Steve Austin. I know a lot about what's going on right now. I just don't watch it as much because I don't have cable, so I can't really watch it. But I love wrestling. I've loved it since I was a little kid. I think it was my Aunt Tammy that actually started getting me into it, because she would, when we would have to be babysat by her when we were little kids, she would be watching like wrestling, and it would be on like early in the morning. And first wrestling I was watching was like AWA and stuff like that. AWA, I think, was the Denver, was AWA, part of its territory was Colorado. So I mean, I started out by watching, people like the Midnight Rockers, Colonel De Beers, people like that. Don't look up Colonel De Beers. That's a character you can't do now, and I may do a list on that someday too. Wrestling personas you couldn't do now. Colonel De Beers was quite a sinister one. But I'm going to do my top 10 favorite wrestlers. And at number 10, Undertaker. Now, he's not high on this list for a couple reasons. One of the main reasons is he had that little part in the middle where he was the American badass, and he was always riding a motorcycle down to the... I was never a big fan of that persona, where he kind of... Undertaker's always been kind of something that was always cool, even when he did it a long time ago. Paul Bearer used to do most of his talking. But the Undertaker was a great character, was around forever. I mean, it was a terrific persona. He had, of course, the streak at WrestleMania where he was like 21-0, and then he lost the streak to Brock Lesnar. And I still to this day don't understand why the streak had to end. I get it, he's old school, and a lot of old school guys believe that you got to go out on your back, counting the lights, and you got to put somebody else over. That's the way you do it. But the problem was he put over Brock Lesnar, who is already considered one of the biggest stars in wrestling at that point. That's why I don't understand that. Who were you really taking care of there? Brock Lesnar was already a gigantic star. He was already the beast incarnate. There was no reason to lose your streak to that guy, because he was already over. The fans already respected him. They already have an understanding that he's pretty much unstoppable. So there was no reason to put him over. So to me, The Undertaker could have been one of those guys that if he would have kept going with the streak, nobody would have cared. Everybody would have been totally fine with it. There's nobody in that locker room that would have said, you should have lost at some point. That streak should have ended before you were... Nobody would have complained in that locker room. I guarantee it. Because he's highly respected. He's had an incredible career, and the streak didn't need to end. Number 9 is Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes is one of the classics. Now, I know a lot of people might know him more for his... wearing the black with the yellow polka dots persona that he had when he came into the WWE, but he was actually a main performer in the Southern Territories. He was incredible in, I think, the old NWA and maybe the old WCW and things like that. He was incredible on the microphone, and for being a guy that looked like he was out of shape, the man could go in a ring. And I mean, he would wrestle some of those 1-hour matches, and I'm going, I have a body kind of like Dusty Rhodes, and I couldn't wrestle for an hour. I'd probably die after 10 minutes, and Dusty Rhodes could keep going. and he was brilliant on the mic, just brilliant. It's too bad the WWE didn't take as good a care of him as they should have when they brought him in instead of goofing on him. At number 8, Razor Ramon. Now, I'm not going Scott Hall from the NWO. I'm talking Razor Ramon. Razor Ramon, the bad guy, the toothpick in the mouth, coming out to that music. You know, it always flick the toothpick out, and I loved Razor Ramon. Those promos were incredible. He was fun to watch. I think he was Intercontinental Champion. He was a ton of fun to watch as Razor Ramon. I didn't care that much for the NWO stuff and him as Scott Hall. And he did have a lot of demons, especially with his drinking and substance abuse. But I hear he's kind of cleaned all that up now. But good on him for that. But there was parts of his career that could have went longer if he could have just, maybe stayed on the straight and narrow. And number 7, Andre the Giant. Now, I wish I had HBO just so I could watch that documentary on him. I would love to see that documentary on Andre the Giant. This was a guy that my real experience with him was with WrestleMania 3. WrestleMania 3 when he wrestled Hulk Hogan. All that build up leading to it. At that point, Andre was in pain. His back hurt. He was not having a good go of it. But he was so gigantic. And I know that people would say, oh, you're 7'4", 600 pounds. And yeah, I mean, a lot of that was, was made up. He was just big. But I guess in real, in actual, he was like 6'10", 6'11", still big dude. And in his younger days, he was probably only 3, if you look at some of his younger, he was probably only 350. But he was still so gigantic, and he was powerful, super powerful. Jim Cornette recently did a podcast on why you didn't put the belt on Andre, the heavyweight championship belt, because there weren't very many people that could have taken it off of him. Back then, wrestling had this kind of this monicum of, yeah, it's sports entertainment, but we still want you to believe that it's real. And if you put the belt on Andre the Giant, who is big and bad enough to take it from him? So it would basically just stay on him all the time, because in reality, there was nobody that could have taken it from him. He was too strong, too big, it couldn't have happened. So that's why Jim Cornette said they didn't really ever put the belt on him. Now, they did put the belt on him, I think, pre-WrestleMania 3. But, of course, Hulk Hogan was going to be the guy that kind of took it from him. And that's the only guy probably in wrestling lore that you would think could have taken it from him in that era. And, of course, that's when Andre is at the end of his career. But Andre was a bad man. He really was. But he was a gentle giant. He took care of the people he wrestled with in the ring. He didn't want to hurt them. But he took pretty good care of them, unless, of course, they weren't taking care of him. Then he would, smack them around a bit and you say, calm down. Number 6, Lita. Lita was fun. Lita was the first female wrestler I ever saw that could actually do male wrestling moves. She looked like a legitimate wrestler in the ring. At that time, most women's wrestlers were there just for their looks. They couldn't move in the ring. They were, they weren't really supposed to. If you're thinking, Trish Stratus was pretty good, but a lot of the other ones like Stacy Keibler and Tori Wilson and a lot of those, they were just there for their looks. There were very few that were legitimate actual wrestlers that came into it. And the ones that were, they would kind of sweep them under the rug because they just wanted to have or they would just kind of hide their talent behind their pretty. Lita could fly, and it was fun to watch Lita. Number 5, The Rock. Dwayne "Rock" Johnson. Some of you might think he should be higher. I still remember Rocky Maivia, and that's always a ding. Every time I think of The Rock, I can still see him bouncing out with that silly hairdo and those little tassels, and it just like that was. Now I know why he could play the Tooth Fairy in a movie. I think he played the Tooth Fairy in a movie, but it's like number 4, Mick Foley. Mick Foley was awesome. When he came into the WWE as Mankind, he played a real creepy character. Now they kind of bust him out of that persona of just kind of playing that little "have a nice day" but he was so much fun, and he was once again, like Dusty Rhodes, great on the microphone, doesn't look like he should be a wrestler, but he would throw his body around, and he put his body on the line. Being thrown off of the top of a Hell in a Cell and falling through one onto tacks. The man was fearless, and probably a detriment to his own health, but he was one of the best of all time. Mick Foley was always entertaining. Anytime whether he's coming out as Cactus Jack, Dude Love, or Mankind, he was always entertaining. Number 3, Chris Jericho. Break the walls down. When Chris Jericho, I remember when Y2J was first going to be a thing, they kept putting the promos up, they kept doing the countdown thing, and when Jericho finally came out, he did not disappoint. Jericho was amazing. Once again, could cut a promo. Only maybe Stone Cold and The Rock could cut promos. In fact, I think Jericho was better at promos than even The Rock. I think Jericho was amazing at promos. There were times when he was ripping on Stephanie McMahon that just, I died laughing. I mean, I was laughing so hard. He was just hilarious. Great in-ring worker. And he's like the Madonna of wrestling. He could always reinvent himself, like when he came up with the list and some of these other things. He could always reinvent himself and stay relevant. He's been in wrestling a long time, and he even went over to New Japan and wrestled Kenny Omega. And there's talk of him coming back to the WWE. He always reinvents himself. It's amazing how he keeps doing it. Number 2, Bret the Hitman Hart. Now, he's in one of my least favorite eras of wrestling. But Bret the Hitman Hart was cool. I don't care about the Montreal Screwjob. I don't know if he really got screwed over or if it was all a work or what. It doesn't matter to me. He was always my favorite. The best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. One of my favorite taglines of any wrestler ever. But I remember when he was with the Hart Foundation, he played a great heel when he was a babyface. He could adapt. He could play great heels and great baby faces. The excellence of execution. He had so many great nicknames and catchphrases. Bret the Hitman Hart, amazing. But number 1, nobody beats this guy. I'm going to tell you who number 1 is, and this is going to be the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Best of all time. My favorite wrestler. This was a guy that came. I remember him as the ringmaster. I remember him as the $1 Million Champion. I remember those. But when he put on that jacket and he had the skull and the beer and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold says so. Stone Cold's, it's something like Austin 3:16 says, I just whooped your ass. This was a guy who was a walking set of catchphrases. He was the best. And of course his whole feud with the McMahon family, basically Vince, was epic. I mean, and for Vince to let himself get embarrassed the way he did, I mean, Stone Cold used to just rip on him and embarrass him in so many moments, and Vince used to do it. I mean, that's how much I think Vince loves money, because he knew Stone Cold Steve Austin was a winning thing, and Stone Cold's still one of the all-time favorites. He is my all-time favorite wrestler. What's your list? Did I forget anybody? Is there other people that you would have put on the list? Don't be offended. There's no reason to get mad at this list. You just put your own list together, and then you put it in the comments. I'd love to read it. Or tell me who you think I left off that should be on there. Maybe I forgot somebody. Remember, I'm a little old, so I might have to revise if, I maybe forgot somebody. But I'm going to probably do a favorite tag teams of all time, so maybe that's why you didn't see some other wrestlers on here. I know Bret was part of a tag team, and a couple of these other guys were part of tag teams, and I know I did forget one guy that I'm going to give an honorable mention to, and that's Randy the Macho Man Savage. When he was a heel, I hated him because of how he treated Elizabeth. When he was a babyface, he was fun to watch. Same with like Roddy Piper and some of those guys. There's so many great wrestlers. I almost could do another 10 list. I could have probably done a top 20. But tell me what you think. Who are your favorite wrestlers? Let me know down in the comments. And with all that being said, to the troops, past, present, and future, thanks for the freedom.